Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be reviewing levels that were submitted to me through the level request thing that I'm doing. Basically, if you've just started watching or haven't seen the announcement video, I'm doing a series where I give feedback on levels you guys suggest me to do. I want to make sure all of the levels are full levels and stuff, and I will be going pretty in depth with feedback, so the episodes might be relatively long. But anyway, let's get into it. Okay, the first level is Deep Space by Alex. I've already played these. I played them all through to find full levels, and this is one of them. So yeah, let's get in with the feedback. What I'm going to be doing for this is I'm going to be going through in practice mode and using the practice song hack so that I can still hear the music. Okay, for the first part, what I'm going to recommend is with the background, try and make well, personally, I think the Galaxy background, it looks all right, but I think a bit more hue variation could be nice. And in fact, I'd probably recommend using more blues and purples instead of oranges and yellows, because I think for a Galaxy that would probably fit a bit better. One thing I'm going to say as well is maybe make it bigger and also make it not as bright, because at the moment it stands out a bit too much from the background or from the black. Also, I'm going to maybe recommend adding some stars in the background as well, like smaller ones. And I'm also going to recommend removing that little pink thing in the bottom right. I don't really think it looks too good. Yeah, also maybe add some more ambient glow, like just massive glow that's just really not that visible but slightly visible, just so that it doesn't have such a harsh contrast. Okay, for the blocks, I'm going to recommend, instead of having these really simple empty blocks, making some block designs that are still kind of simple, maybe modern-esque, but with a bit more design into them. I think actually some sort of tech design could be quite nice with this. And I'm also going to recommend filling in more space in the part with block designs and gears, because at the moment there's not that many of them and it kind of feels empty. Also, another thing I'm going to recommend, try and add a bit of air deco. I don't know what you could do. Probably just some arrows or something, but if you have more blocks and then you add arrows and stuff, that should be enough for this level. I know the main focus is the background, but you do want to have some detail in the foreground, otherwise it'll end up looking empty. Okay, for this first part, the gameplay seems okay. I would make it a bit more difficult maybe, because at the moment it's kind of free. But one thing you definitely want to work on is your structuring. Now, at the moment, the structures aren't the worst thing ever, but they're very simple and there's not much diversity in them. Like, most of them are just squares. Some of them have a few slopes, but that's pretty much it. Be a bit more creative with them in general. Also, same thing with last part. Add some more block design. You could do this by adding something kind of textile. Maybe check out someone like One Eye or someone like that. They tend to have a pretty nice textile, and you could probably use that to your advantage. Also, the background here looks pretty nice. There's one recommendation I have, and is maybe add a bit more to it, because at the moment it's a very repetitive background. You've just got these small stars. I'd maybe add some planets in there. Not very massive, just very small in the distance, and kind of blend them in, just to add something that breaks it all up. Also, for those stars, I would have them actually slowly pulsing in and out, if you know what I mean. So they get slightly brighter and slightly less bright. And I think that would add a nice, like, piece of dynamic to the block design. Okay, this part looks okay. One thing I'm going to recommend is actually keep the background you had in the part before this and overlay this on top of that, because I do think though that like starry night background with this would work really well together to make a pretty good background, but separating them like this kind of makes them both look empty. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, this is my least favorite part so far. I've already played through these levels, so I know which parts are which. But personally, I'm gonna recommend splitting up some of the block designs into smaller blocks so you don't have these massive lumps of block, and also like using less slopes for the designs, because at the moment the designs are like 100% slopes. I think you should mix in some flats as well and make it have more traditional blocks. And again, with the design, try and do something that isn't just this empty. For the background, I feel like the execution isn't that great here because the dots you've got in the bottom of the background, they don't blend in very well. Also, with the glow that you've got in the background, I think it's a bit too intense, and because you haven't got anything behind the blocks, it just shines through the blocks and appears over them, which looks kind of weird. And then in the top as well, you've literally got no detail, so I'd recommend changing that. Okay, this end art is quite nice. I think maybe make sure to turn off glow on all of those little dots, and maybe add a bit more like stuff behind all of these things, but it's not too bad. It just feels a bit weird in some places, but it's pretty decent art. But yeah, that was my feedback for that level. After playing that, I'm going to be honest and say I personally don't believe this deserves a feature. Potentially a star rate, but Rob doesn't really give those out anymore, so, or at least not very often, so yeah, I definitely work on the things I recommended, but I'm not that sure if it will get rated. Yeah, keep working on it. Okay, the next level is Vegan by Gepsoni. Let's play this. Okay, first thing I want to say about this first part is the colors are okay. I like how you're being creative with them, but I think they're slightly too saturated and you've got a bit too much contrast. Coming from me, that's obviously quite rich, considering contrast is like my favorite thing to do. But I just think that because you don't have that much of the other colors, it feels quite odd. Also, for object color, I would strongly recommend against using white and pulsing it into different colors. Instead, I'm going to recommend setting it as a low saturation, high brightness version of the background color. You can do that by just clicking on the object tab and then clicking copy color in the bottom left. And if you add glow over that, that tends to look really nice. I'm also going to recommend adding those black like thicker lines under these lines as well. I know it's a very generic sort of design thing, but I think it would just help this block design stand out a bit more from the background. Also, make sure to add a black base behind all of your designs, because if you don't, anything in the background, including the actual like background, will just shine through the blocks and it'll end up looking really messy. Also, design-wise, I think you should work on being a bit more creative with your designs, because at the moment they're pretty much just default objects with glow. You have got some variation in there and a few things placed, but you haven't really varied it that much. It's very basic. And I do think with more complex designs, it would probably look a bit nicer. Actually, this block here is a very good example of what I mean. All you've got really is a default texture with a bit of glow and nothing else. So personally, I would actually recommend doing something a little bit more creative. I would also recommend against using these 2.1 blocks in general because they don't tend to look quite good, especially in design. They can work quite well in art styles, but not really in this. Also, something I quickly noticed, when you're doing blocks that have this like thick outline with deco in it and then an inner part here, make sure you use the double outline things because it removes this inconsistency in distance and makes it look a lot cleaner. Okay, I've already seen pretty much the entire level. Like, I've watched it in videos, level request streams, that sort of thing. And all of the feedback I've given is pretty much the same for the whole level, like just work on those things. I would actually recommend improving the gameplay a lot because it's quite weird to play. Especially parts like this are incredibly unreadable and awkward for the player. But yeah, keep working on it. Personally, I don't think it's feature worthy, maybe rate worthy, but definitely not feature worthy in my opinion. But keep working on it. Hopefully you can improve it to be feature worthy, in my opinion. Okay, the next level is Devon's Metal Garden by Devon 2003. I have also seen this level and played it beforehand to make sure it's a proper level, so yeah, let's get into it. Okay, let's pause here, and first thing I want to say, I do like how you're varying your colors and using multiple different colors at once, but it's very static still with that. Like the only color variation you've done is on the outlines. I do think in the designs themselves you should add more color variation. Now, I do like how the designs themselves are solid so that nothing shines through them. That is a very good idea. But in the background with the glow, for example, I think that glow should probably not be white because it kind of contrasts in a weird way. I'd more recommend having that as a light blending version of the background. Also, maybe set a design style background instead of the empty one because the empty one tends to look quite bad when you're doing design because you end up having to compensate with air deco. Okay, one thing that I quickly want to mention, these design things here, they're a cool idea, but you need to move them lower so that the player doesn't go below them. Also, in general, I think more glow could be used on the T3 layer. It kind of, it's hard to explain, but there's not that much like shining over the object. Most of it is below, which kind of makes this weird contrast between the background and the foreground. Okay, one thing that I remember wanting to say, do not use glow as portals. Instead, actually have the portals there because it's just incredibly unreadable. Like, for example, I didn't have any idea that that was a dual portal. That could have been a upside down portal or a UFO portal. I just don't know. Also, for the air deco, I think you should remove all of the blending things you have right now because I think they're just making it look quite messy, and instead I would do more like the connectors that you have coming off the blocks right now, but vary it up a little bit. So maybe have some that are slightly thicker and have different designs. Also, I've actually watched a video of this level as well, and for the later parts, I'm pretty much just going to recommend try and make the colors work a bit better because in the later part, there's some clashing that doesn't work too well. And also for the whole thing, just try and use a bit more glow. Glow isn't a bad thing like some people would make you believe. And I do believe in this level especially, there should be more of it. Also, with your colors, I'm also going to recommend using some hue variation on the pink for some of the designs as well, maybe plus 20 or minus 20 in certain places with glow, and that could look quite nice. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say for this level. Personally, I think this is star rate worthy. I don't think it's feature worthy, maybe very low end feature, but keep working on it though, it could potentially get rated, and yeah, I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, let's move on to level 4, which is Sakibin Egg by Rue. I've already seen this level and it's kind of a meme level, but it does have some serious parts, so I'm still going to judge it seriously. Okay, the first thing I want to say is all of the parts before this orange part just looked pretty much the same as the original. Yeah, throw in some more orange hues and also add some extra colors that wouldn't necessarily work with red or orange, maybe like blue, to mix it up a bit and make it look a bit more original, I guess. Also, try and do some creative designs. In this part, for example, the designs are relatively creative and it looks a lot nicer. Like this earlier part, for example, the designs are very similar to the original, very empty, very bland, whereas here they've actually added like detail. So I'd recommend for the parts like that, I would do something like this where you actually rebirth it instead of just doing the same deco as before. For the parts I'm playing right now, again, this looks very similar to the original. There are some changes, but it's in general quite simple and boring. Okay, this part's quite nice. I see they've tried to do something quite original. It's not as good as the part that I saw earlier, but it's still alright. I would recommend adding more variation in hue, probably, and also adding some red into it as well, just to mix it up a bit. But apart from that, this should be fine. I do think there should be a bit more detail in the designs, but that could probably be okay without it. Also, maybe some more air deco that isn't glow. Make sure to use don't fade and don't enter in the block designs, and pretty much everything, otherwise it will end up looking kind of weird. Okay, after playing pretty much every other part of this level, the level overall just feels very similar to the original. It's not much of a rebirth really. Overall, the execution just feels kind of lacking and lazy almost. It feels like instead of trying to remake Sakibin Hell, you just tried to change the gameplay and slightly improve the deco, which is a bit of a shame because something like this could probably have potential. Like that last part, for example, that I just got to. Like, that just looks like 1.0 deco. Overall, I don't think this level is rate worthy. I think it's potentially, maybe star rate, but I don't think it's ever going to get featured. But yeah, let's move on to the last level of today's video. Okay, and the last level is Spazzed Out by Mario Kirby. Let's play it. I kind of like this first part. I think the color execution could be a lot better. I think more saturation and slightly darker in the blocks would be a lot better, but it doesn't look bad. I also think the movement in the background and with the foreground shading should be a bit smoother because at the moment it's very jolted. Okay, this part is amazing. Maybe some air deco in the form of arrows, but what you've got here already looks really nice. Okay, one thing I'm going to say with this part, and I remember thinking this when I was playing through them, this should be a lot more readable. The reason it's not readable is because of how fast the moving objects appear. What I'd recommend doing is not having the blocks move it in completely, instead having them always be visible and make them move up like one block. This part I'm not a huge fan of. It could do with a lot more detail in my opinion, but it's not the worst in the world. It's just not my favorite personally. Okay, yeah, I remember this part being really nice. There isn't anything that I could really think of to improve this part apart from maybe the gameplay, because the gameplay isn't the best. But deco-wise, this part is amazing. You could improve the gameplay, obviously, and maybe make the shading on those palm trees a bit cleaner, but overall, this part is just really nice. This part as well is quite nice. It's not the best, but it's pretty effective at what it's trying to do. All of the things that are white, maybe have them pulsing different colors. Pink and slightly orangey, maybe. This part is very nice, but the white things could be pulsing in a different color to make it look a bit more diverse. Okay, one thing I'm going to say is that spike gap right at the end, I'd remove that because it's kind of out of place for the difficulty. It's a decent level. Some parts are not that great. More of the parts in the level are good than bad, but there are a few parts that I would definitely change up. But overall, this isn't a bad level. I could see this getting featured potentially. I don't think it'll get epic. If the entire level was the quality of the last few parts, then I could see this easily getting an epic rating. It's just that those few parts that aren't the best kind of let it down. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to have to go edit this video now. See you guys in the next episode.